The price was written in faded marker on a warped piece of plywood, nailed to a tree by the lake. $20. That was all it said. No explanation, no promises, no warning about what waited beyond the narrow trail that led into the rock. When the broke veteran stopped and read it, his breath fogging the cold air, he laughed once, a short sound without humor, because $20 was all he had left in the world. If you believe in the silent hero, in second chances, and in the quiet strength of people who keep going when everything says stop, take a moment right now to like this video, comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this survive because people like you believe they matter. His name was Thomas Reed, a former Army engineer who came home from service carrying invisible damage and very visible exhaustion. The country he returned to felt louder, colder, and far less forgiving than the one he had left. Jobs slipped through his fingers as easily as sleep did at night. Friends drifted away. Family ties weakened under the strain of things he could not explain. Eventually, even the small apartment he clung to disappeared, replaced by nights at his truck and mornings staring at the steering wheel, wondering how everything had collapsed so quietly. The only steady presence in Thomas's life was a large, aging dog named Bear, a German shepherd mix with cloudy eyes and a limp from an old injury. Bear had been his shadow since Thomas found him at a rescue shelter years earlier, both of them unwanted, both of them worn down. They shared food without thinking, warmth without words, and a mutual understanding that survival was no longer about comfort, but about endurance. That was how Thomas ended up standing by the lake, $20 bill folded in his pocket, staring at a dark opening in the rock face. The so-called cave house had once been a fisherman's shelter decades ago, carved partly by hand and partly by nature. Most people avoided it, whispering about damp walls, isolation, and bad luck. But to Thomas, it looked like something he understood. It was hidden, it was quiet, and it did not ask questions. The owner, an old man who wanted nothing more than to be done with it, took the money without ceremony. There were no papers worth mentioning, just a handshake and shrug, as if both of them knew the cave was more burden than asset. Thomas walked away with a rusted key that barely fit the lock and the strange feeling that he had crossed a line he could not uncross. Living in the cave was harder than he expected. The lake air carried moisture that crept into everything. Nights were cold even in summer, and winter promised to be brutal. Thomas used scraps of wood and salvaged insulation to block drafts, and he built a small stove from old metal parts to keep the worst of the cold away. Bear adapted faster than Thomas did, finding warm spots and curling up with a contented sigh, as they had finally found somewhere they could stay without being chased off. Days passed slowly. Thomas fished when he could, repaired boats for locals when work appeared, and spent long hours fixing the cave piece by piece. It was not pretty, but it was his. For the first time in years, he stopped wondering where he would sleep that night. The change came on a gray afternoon when Bear refused to come back inside. The dog stood near the far-walled cave, nose pressed to the stone, growling low in his throat. Thomas assumed it was an animal, maybe a raccoon or snake, until Bear began pawing at the rock with strange urgency. Thomas pulled Bear back at first, worried about collapse or injury, but the dog would not let it go. There was something different about that section of wall, a hollow sound when Thomas knocked against it, a faint draft of air that did not belong in solid stone. His training kicked in before his doubt could stop him. Using borrowed tools and shaking hands, Thomas began to chip away at the rock. It took hours. Dust filled the air. His arms burned. Bear watched closely, tail still, eyes sharp. When the stone finally gave way, it revealed not darkness, but narrow tunnel reinforced with old timber supports, leading deeper into the cliff. Thomas felt his heart pound as he stepped inside. The tunnel opened into a hidden chamber, far larger than the cave itself, dry and carefully constructed. Wooden crates lined the walls, marked with dates from decades earlier. Inside them were documents, sealed containers, and heavy metal cases that made his breath catch. What Thomas had stumbled into was a forgotten vault of a long-abandoned land trust, created during a time when money was hidden from banks and governments alike. The contents were untouched. Bonds, deeds, gold certificates, assets quietly compounding in silence while the world above forgot they existed. The value was staggering. Enough to change not just Thomas's life, but the entire region. But Thomas did not celebrate. He sat on the cold stone floor with Bear's head resting on his knee and cried, deep, shaking sobs that came from years of holding everything in. Not tears of greed, but of release. The cave had not saved him. His dog had, and the man he used to be had not been wasted after all. What followed was careful and deliberate. Thomas contacted authorities, lawyers, and historians, refusing to touch anything without clarity. His honesty surprised everyone involved. Investigations confirmed the assets were unclaimed, legally abandoned, and now tied to the land he owned. The cave house by the lake was no longer a joke. It was history. Thomas used the money differently than anyone expected. He paid his debts quietly. He built a proper home into the rock, preserving the land instead of exploiting it. He funded housing programs for veterans, job training, and mental health support in nearby towns. He restored the lake access to the community and kept the cave as a place of learning, not profit. People who once pitted him now spoke his name with respect. But Thomas never chased attention. He walked the shoreline each morning with Bear, grateful for the sound of water and the weight of responsibility that felt earned, not given. Just before the ending, take a moment to comment below and share what this story meant to you. Your words might remind someone that hope can hide in the most unlikely places. Thomas Reed did not become rich because of luck alone. He survived long enough to recognize opportunity, trusted the one companion who never gave up on him, and chose integrity when no one was watching. The cave by the lake was never just a shelter. It was proof that even when the world prices you at $20, your true worth can still be waiting in the dark, ready to change everything.